Hello everyone, my name is Yoav and Dana. I'm Director of DNA here at MyHeritage.
And I'm Dana Drutman. I'm a product manager right here at MyHeritage.
And today we're going to talk to you about how we do DNA at MyHeritage. Now, just to start out, we're going to say that MyHeritage is the leading global destination for family history and DNA. We have transformed family history into an activity that is both accessible and instantly rewarding. Our user community enjoys access to a massive library of historical records, the most internationally diverse collection of family trees, and groundbreaking search and matching technologies. And now we're going to talk specifically about DNA, and because this webinar is focused on DNA, we've decided to save a few slides for the basics of DNA. Now, DNA is the building block of life. So the famous AGCT, also called nucleotides, are the code that decide who we are and what we are. And this is correct on a universal level. So all living organisms have these building blocks. And that's the beauty of DNA, which makes all of us very much in common. Now, DNA is stored in the body in chromosomes. And inside each chromosome, the DNA nucleotides are stored in a double helix, which is a very efficient way of condensing a lot of data. Because you have to remember that the DNA data in one cell in our body has the code to build all of us, which is a lot of data, and it's condensed in a very efficient way in the double helix inside the chromosome. Now here is an image of the human chromosomes. As you can see, there are 22 autosomal chromosomes, and an autosomal chromosome is a chromosome that we inherit from both our parents, and both females and males have 22 pairs of those. And I'll continue explaining a bit more about these later on. And we have what are called the sex chromosomes, which is what you can see here, the X and Y chromosomes. For females, they have 2 X chromosomes, and for males, we have X and Y. Now, the beautiful thing about chromosomes, and this is a real image of how they look when we look under a microscope, is that you can clearly see that for each pair, one we inherit from our paternal side, our father, and one from our maternal side. So 50% of our DNA comes from mom and 50% comes from dad. Now, another beautiful thing about DNA, and I said a bit earlier about this, is this is an example of the human chromosomes above. And you can see below chromosomes of a chimpanzee. And you can see how similar this is, which is something very, very beautiful, showing that we're all very, very much similar, even with other organisms on Earth. Now, human beings are very, very much similar to each other. So almost 99% of our DNA is the same exact like every other human being. Now, why is this? Because most of the DNA does very crucial things in our body. So we all have hands, legs, skin, eyes, hair. This is all genes and pieces of our body that are coded inside our DNA. So if someone has a big variation of them, he has very big problems, health-related or even lethal, that can't be born with them. So 99% of our DNA is the same. But when we look into genealogy and DNA research, what we're actually looking for is not what's the same, but what's a bit different. Because we don't want to tell everyone, okay, everyone's related and that's, it's a beautiful thing, but that's not what we're aiming for. We're aiming for here at MyHeritage and any DNA testing is to aim to find the variation between us. So in MyHeritage, we look at 700,000 SNPs. SNPs are single nucleotide polymorphisms, meaning they're single DNA points where there is variation in the population, meaning we're not the same in all of them. And these single mutations are very much have lots of data inside of them. Why? Because for certain ethnicities, for certain regions, there's certain mutations that have occurred over the years. So if there's a tribe in the Amazon that has been untouched for 2,000 years, they have specific mutations in their DNA that are unique only to them. And this is why when we test DNA for genealogy, for health, for traits, for stuff like that, it's very, very important to find and talk about these specific variations. So like I said, we test about 700,000 of these so-called SNPs, and that's out of 3 billion DNA nucleotides in our whole body. So it's a very, very small portion.
So now, after we understood a little bit about the basics of the DNA, let's see what MyHeritage has to offer. So before we dive into more details, first I'd like to share with you our DNA kit. This is a DNA kit, pretty beautiful, you must agree. Taking the test is very, very easy. Every kit contains 2 cheek swabs and 2 vials. When you want to take a DNA test, you simply scrape the inner part of your cheek and place it into a vial. It doesn't involve any blood or any pain. It's very simple, takes just a few minutes. So if you're interested in taking a DNA test, all you have to do is to order the kit online. Afterwards, you will take the test, then you will send the sample back to us, back to the lab. Once it gets to the lab, we will analyze your DNA, and in 3 to 4 weeks later on, you will be able to see your results online. Your results are pretty exciting. You'll be able to see examples as we go. But before, let's take a look at what happens to the DNA sample once it gets to the lab.
Okay, so now you've seen what happens in the lab, but now we're going to start talking about our first DNA product, which is your ethnicity estimate. Now, like I said before, the variation in our DNA is what is the data that stores our different ethnicities, and when we go forward and we talk about DNA matching, this is also where we find that. But how is the DNA inherited, and how do we inherit our different ethnicities? So we have here an example of Mike, who has 2 parents, 2 grandparents, and 4 great-grandparents. And in this case, you can see here that all of his great-grandparents have a purple ethnicity. So obviously, if each of his grandparents inherited 50% from his great-grandfather and 50% from great-grandmother, then both of them have 100% purple ethnicity, and so on and so on. So Mike is said to have 50% purple ethnicity. So as you can see here, on his paternal side, things are a bit more complicated. So for one side of his great-grandmother, you can see that she has orange ethnicity. And on the other side, he has 50% blue and 50% red. And so his father inherited 50% orange and 25% red and blue. And this makes Mike, theoretically, 50% purple, 25 orange, and 12.5 blue and pink. Now, I'm saying theoretically because usually DNA does not exactly follow this exact inheritance pattern. So for instance, if Mike had a sibling, it's not so common that they have the exact same DNA. Obviously, all of us or most of us have siblings, and we're not exactly alike. We don't look alike. We don't act alike. This means that we have a bit different DNA. And how does this happen? So the DNA that we take, for instance, in this case from our father, is a mix of what he got from his grandparents. But me and my brother can take 50% of that, but the 50% can vary. So all of my father's DNA is a mishmash of DNA, and I take a different 50% for my sibling. Now, on average, siblings do have 50% same DNA, but there is a variation of DNA, and that's why sometimes siblings don't get the exact same ethnicity. For instance, if my great-great-grandmother is shown here in blue ethnicity, I receive 12.5%. There is an option that one of my siblings will only receive 3% of that.
So after you have explained a little bit about how the ethnicity work, we'd like to share with you our experience. I would like to share with you my results. I took a MyHeritage DNA test a few weeks ago and I got my results. And I think that the way I got it was pretty exciting. I just got this video. I hope you're ready. So I have to admit that I'm pretty boring because I have only 3 types of ethnicities, but it's very exciting just to see it so clearly. I'm 94.5% Ashkenazi Jewish, 4.2% West Asian, and 1.3% Middle Eastern. Very easy to see. If I want to have a better understanding on each of those ethnicities, I can just press on one of them, and I will have more information about this ethnicity, where these people came from, what they have done, and so on and so on. Very interesting. Although I had 3 ethnicities, you can see here an example of Henry. Henry is some random person, that he has lots of ethnicities. He has more than 10 different ethnicities, and they all can be shown on the map. Now if I come back to my ethnicity results. Here is another view that I have at MyHeritage that I can look at some interesting facts about my ethnicities. One of the powerful tools that MyHeritage can provide is the sync between the DNA results and the family trees that we have in our website. So if we take a look at a part of my family tree, you can see here Ezekiel Habibi, who is my great-great-grandfather. I don't know a lot about him. I know only that he was born around 1872. And I know that he was born in Shiraz, then Persia, and now Iran. This is the same information that I know about Miriam Habibi, his wife. I know that she was born about 4 years after he was born, and I know that she was born in the same place. Now when I come back to the ethnicity results, I can press here the show events on my family tree, and I can see some very interesting events right on this map. You can see events of marriage, about birth, death, and burial of my direct ancestors. So if I look at the information that I have in my family tree and I place it on the map, it's very interesting. My ethnicity results do make sense to me because I know that I have a lot of family that was born in Poland and the area. And we just saw the example of my great-great-grandparents that was born in Iran. And me and my parents and my grandparents were all born and raised in Israel. So these results do make sense to me. I can go on each of those circles with a number and I can press them and I can see which events are related to them. So I can see here the information that was taken directly from my family tree at MyHeritage and the information that I have on those direct ancestors that I have in my tree.
Okay, and as Dana has shown, she is pretty boring. She has only 3 ethnicities. But today, the ethnicity reference panel that we have at MyHeritage includes 36 different populations. This is the most of any of the different providers. And this is something that we're optimizing all of the time. The way you build a reference panel is basically you have to collect consented DNA from different regions and ethnicities around the world. And then our algorithms take your DNA and compare it to all of these different groups, in this case 36, and show how many percentage you have from each group, if at all. So like Dana said, for some people who are pure ethnicity, have been the same 10 generations in the same place, they can get, for instance, 100% Scandinavian. But some individuals who are more admixed, like me and lots of the people you know, you can get a variation of ethnicities from where all of your generations came. Now, the way we build our reference panel, this is something unique, and it's one of the added values here at MyHeritage, is we had a very interesting, and we still have, a very interesting project called Founder Population Project. In this project, we searched individuals in the MyHeritage user base, which, as we said earlier, is the most international out of all the competitors. So we have users anywhere from Greenland to Fiji to Indonesia, almost every country in the world. And we searched users who have many different generations who have lived in the same area. Meaning, if you, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and even farther lived in India, back then people didn't move so much. So we can assume that for all the generations backwards, you all lived in India. And we contacted these people and we offered them free DNA so they can participate in this project. And that's how we collected DNA from areas where no other person can. And this is something that is unique to us and is very much ongoing. And what we're hoping to reach and we're aiming for is having a reference panel for up to 100 different populations. And this is something we think we can reach. It is very hard because, like I said earlier, most of our DNA is very much similar. So lots of ethnicities and lots of people from different regions, even though the region is, maybe a little bit secluded, the DNA is still very similar. So our DNA science team is working very hard to try to understand the variations between these different ethnicities. And hopefully we're aiming to have the biggest reference panel out there. Now, there's no need to worry. So someone who bought a DNA kit now, when a reference panel is only, for instance, 36 populations, which is still very much, once we add more populations, we will give the users at no cost the option to see the new reference estimation.
So now we understood how the ethnicity works. And now we'd like to share with you another very interesting feature that MyHeritage has to offer, which are the DNA matches. But before we dive into what you can get from MyHeritage, first of all, let's all understand how we inherit the DNA from our parents. So, as Yoav explained before, each of us inherits 50% of each of our parents. Let's take this example, Frank and Molly. What we're looking at 2 purple stripes on Frank's side and 2 orange stripes on Molly's side. These 2 stripes represent one pair of autosomal chromosomes inside our body. As you remember, we have 22 such pairs. So Ben and Lisa are their children. Each of their children inherited exactly 50% from each of the parents, because Ben inherited 1 chromosome of pair. For example, this is pair number 7. So one of the chromosomes in pair number 7 was inherited from Frank, and the other chromosome was inherited from Molly. You can see that each of the chromosomes that Ben has is a different combination from each of the pair that this parent had. This process is called meiosis. Lisa had the same process as well. She inherited 50% from Frank and 50% from Molly. But you can see that the combination of the 2 purples and the 2 oranges that she inherited are different. And if we want to compare the DNA of Ben and Lisa, we can see that there are some areas that are exactly the same, but there are a lot of areas that are not the same. On average, when we compare between a brother and a sister, in average there will be 50% of the DNA that matches between them. Now let's take it 1 generation further. Ben and Lisa, both of them had children. Ben has Eric and Lisa has Julia. Just like Ben and Lisa, also Eric and Julia, every one of them inherits 50% from each of their parents. So if we continue with this example of pair number 7, and we take a look at Eric, we can see that Eric inherited one chromosome from Ben, which is a combination of the two chromosomes that Ben had in his pair number 7. The other stripe, the blue stripe, represents the other chromosome that Eric inherited from Ben's spouse. The same goes for Julia. She also inherited 50% from her mother, Lisa, which is the combination of the two purples and the two oranges, and another one chromosome, the other 50%, from Lisa's spouse. Now when we compare between the DNA of Eric and Julia, we can see that there is even less areas that are in common. Only one of the chromosomes out of the two chromosomes in the pair has matches, because in this example we assume that there is no any type of relationship between the spouses of Lisa and Ben. Eric and Julia have on average 12.5% of shared DNA, and this specific combination of shared DNA in only one of the chromosomes is one of the ways to reveal a connection of first cousin between two people. As Yoav explained before, the further we go along the generation, the less shared DNA we have. So if we take a look at the first generations, our parents, our children, brothers and sisters, on average, we have 50% of shared DNA. And as long as we go further down the generations or up, the amount of shared DNA is dropped by half. And as you remember, it's only the average DNA. So for example, you and your third cousin share on average less than 1% of the DNA. But it is on average, so there might be a case in which you know that you are blood related to this third cousin, but there is no DNA that you both share together. So if you take a DNA test, you will never reveal this connection.
Okay, and now, thanks Dana. Now, the way that we evaluate a match, and like Dana said, in certain matches it's much more easier if the match is very close relation to me. For instance, my father or mother, or my sibling, or even my grandparent. It's very easy because we share comparably a big amount of DNA. In other cases, it's very, very hard. So here at MyHeritage, we look at 3 main parameters to distinguish what match this is. We look at the total amount of shared DNA, which means how much DNA is in common between me and someone else. So the edge case scenario is for 2 twins who check their DNA. You can see that it should be 100%, meaning that or 99.9%, meaning that in every area that we check, the DNA should be similar for them. Now the other edge case, 2 random people who have no connection should have almost 0 DNA that is related to each other. So what we look at is the total amount of shared DNA, but another important factor is how many segments of DNA. So for instance, we can have one very, very long segment of DNA, or we can have 5 smaller segments that are the same total shared DNA as the long segment. But these 2 DNA samples can show different relationships and helps us predict which is the correct one. And another factor we look at is the largest segment. The largest the segment is, it helps us find out which one of the correct relationships this is. Now, it's very important for us to make sure that everyone understands that DNA is not always black or white, and in some cases, and that's the beauty of DNA. So even though theoretically certain degrees have certain percentages of DNA shared, there are known cases where for instance, third cousins can have way more DNA than 0.78 or not at all. And that's why it's very important for us to make sure that you know that if you know that the relative is indeed your relative and you don't get a DNA match to that, it does not necessarily mean that he's not your DNA relative. It means that sometimes it's very, very hard because there's almost no DNA shared in this specific relationship. And now we're going to talk to you a bit about why you should choose MyHeritage DNA. So the first and foremost reason is the fact that MyHeritage has the biggest and most international user base. Now, why is this important? In most of the countries today, there's lots of people who live there now, and maybe for 2-3 generations, but their ancestors aren't from there. So for instance, back in the United States, maybe you lived there and your parents and maybe even grandparents, but way back sometime, most of your ancestors came from England, Ireland, Italy, Scandinavia, and so forth, Mexico, and many other countries. And why is this important? Because MyHeritage has users that are still living in these countries, meaning that, for instance, if your great-grandfather came on a ship to New York from Finland way back in 1901, maybe he had a brother, and maybe he had kids, and maybe his kids had kids that are still in Finland. Now, with MyHeritage, there's a very good chance that one of those kids in Finland took a DNA test, and you would get a match to him, and you would find a match that otherwise there would be no option for you to get, because some countries were the only one who sell DNA kits. So this is something that's very, very important. As I've stated before, it's also very important when you want to build a very good ethnicity feature, because we have users from every one of the ethnicities in the world. So it's very easy for us to collect DNA that the users consent to give us, and to build models predicting the different ethnicities. And that's why we think we can reach the highest accuracy in ethnicity inference on one hand, and also the most populations that are available. Another reason that's a bit more technical is that MyHeritage allows matching between cross-vendors, or cross-vendor matching. So when most of the competitors match only between users who have their own kit, in MyHeritage you can upload to us from all of the different vendors, or you can buy a MyHeritage kit, and we, using something called imputation, which I'll elaborate soon, we actually allow you to get matches to all of the different vendors. So if somehow someone took one competitor's kit and then bought a MyHeritage DNA kit, we allow the matching between that, and that's something that only we do. So for instance, you can see here one vendor has a specific lists of DNA SNPs, as I've said before, single nucleotide polymorphisms, that he checks, here on the left in green. And another vendor checks for these blue ones, and the reason for this is most of the vendors use different technologies that test slightly different areas in the DNA. So most of them are very similar, but some areas in the DNA only one vendor tests and the one vendor does not. What we do is we fill in the blanks. So for instance, if you see here there's a row where vendor number 1 doesn't have data, using imputation, which is a statistical test in which we add DNA in a very, very high accuracy, we can fill in those blind spots, and then we can match between both of the vendors. And this has been very, very successful for us, with many success stories about users who found relatives only because we had this option. So it's something that's very helpful to the community. And it's very, very easy to upload your DNA. You can do it from your profile on the tree. As you can see here, you can do it from the DNA tab in the site itself. And it's true that obviously we want you to buy an MyHeritage DNA kit, but if you've already bought one and you're satisfied with your ancestry ethnicity results, there's no problem for you to upload the DNA. The matches are for free, so you can get free matches, and this is for forever. And actually, in the near future, we're even going to open the Ethnicity Estimate, which is something new for uploaders. So if you uploaded in the past, or if you plan on uploading in the future, know that matches are straight away free, and ethnicity will be open also without any charge.
The last reason of why choosing the MyHeritage DNA, and I think is the most exciting one, is the amazing synergy that we can do between the DNA results and the family trees that we have in MyHeritage for many years. So this is how the DNA matches page looks like. This is my DNA matches page. You can see me on the upper left corner, Dana Drutman from Israel. You can see that I have 247 different matches, which is, in my opinion, a lot. I don't think I can ever go through all of them. For every match, I have basic information about this person. Here's an example of Phyllis. She's in her 20s and she lives in the US. For every person, I would also see the possible relationships, and there is a reason why it's in plural, because there are some cases in which we have the information that can help us understand the exact relationship between the two of us. And there are some cases in which we can only know the range of the possible relationships between me and my DNA match. This is because of the reasons that Yoav mentioned before, that the DNA changes from one person to another and that the matches is not an absolute number, but it changes. You don't have to remember by heart what all of those relationships mean, because if you press the question mark right after it, they will open a graph that will show you all your direct ancestors and what does it mean, those different relationships that you and this DNA and this match can share. So it's very easy to understand. Every DNA match would also, you will be able to see the match quality based on the 3 characteristics that you have mentioned before. You can see the shared DNA, both by percentage and by length. Centimorgan is the measurement unit for genetic distance. You can see the amount of shared segments and what is the length of the largest segment of them all. Also for this, you have a question mark that if you press it, you will get a pop-up that explains to you every one of those characteristics. So you don't have to remember anything by heart. Everything is written here. Very simple. In my opinion, the more exciting part of this page is the right part, because this is the part when we can reveal more interesting information based on the family trees that we have. What types of information can you see? So first of all, if this DNA match appears on another tree, you will be able to see on how many individuals has in this tree and who manages this tree. So in the example of Phyllis, she is the one that manages this tree. But if we look at Margaret, we can see that Margaret appears in a tree that is managed by someone else. We can see also who is the manager for this tree. So it might be more interesting to start exploring those relationships, the DNA matches that you find between people that have a family tree, because it will help you try and analyze and investigate and have a better understanding of your family trees and maybe find a connection between the two of you, so you will know for sure what is the relationship between the two of you. Another very interesting information that you can see between you and a DNA match is the smart matches. Smart matches are individuals that appears in 2 different trees but are considered to be the same person. For example, I appear in my tree, the tree that I manage, and I also appear in a tree that my cousin manages. So I'm the same individual, but I appear in 2 different trees. This is a smart match. MyHeritage can tell me that this individual on the 2 trees is me. So if I have smart match between me and my DNA match, it might be easier for me to start and understand what is the exact relationship between me and this DNA match. For example, me and Phyllis, we have 4 smart matches, and I can also press the view matches. It will open a new window that will show me who are these specific users, who are these individuals that we have a match with, which is very interesting to explore from there. Another very interesting information that we can find is the common ancestral surnames. What we do is that we look around the direct ancestors in your tree and in your DNA matches tree, and we try to look for surnames that you both share. Because if we find some surname that you both share, it might help us better understand what is the exact relationship between us. Not only we tell you what is the surname that we share. In this example, it's Kramer. If we had more ancestral surnames that are common, we would share them too. But if we hover it, we can see more information. We can see how many people from Phyllis's tree share this surname and how many from my tree share this surname, and what is the shortest length from me to the first person that has this family name. So this information might be very helpful for us to try and understand, because in my example, as you can see, I have 247 different DNA matches. I think that going one by one and looking for the connection between me and this person would drive me crazy. So I'd rather focus on the ones that I have more information. I can use the advanced tools that MyHeritage has in order to sort the DNA results, either by the portion of the shared DNA, either by the amount of the shared segments, by the length of the largest segment, or just to sort them alphabetically by the full name. I can also use the advanced searching tools to search a specific full name of a match that I know I have, to search only for results from a specific country, or to search also only results that have a specific ancestor surname that is shared between me and my DNA match. I can also filter my results by who has a family site, who have a smart matches with me, and who has shared ancestral surnames. So it's very, very easy. For every one of those people, I can just press the contact button, which I can easily start on writing a message to Phyllis. I can also use the writer down corner where it says view tree, and I can go and see Phyllis's tree and maybe better understand what is their relationship. Of course, I'll be able to see her tree only according to the privacy settings, so nothing private will be revealed. Another very interesting thing that I can do is I can write a note, as you can see that I'm doing right now for Margaret. You can just press the icon on the upper right corner of each DNA match, and a note will be open. And that way I can start on writing down what I have done so far, which records I've already found, what am I looking for, even maybe I started contacting Margaret, what I have done so far. So the next time that I will come back, I will be able to continue from the exact place that I've stopped before.
Okay, now we're going to talk about the future of DNA and MyHeritage. Now, I want to say two things. So, first of all, MyHeritage DNA has been going on only for 4 months now. So this is a very, very exciting time here at MyHeritage. And we're new to this now, and we're focusing a lot of this because we're understanding the beauty of DNA and how much it correlates, like you've seen in Dana's examples, with our existing features. And another thing is that MyHeritage's foremost mission is to help our users and assist them in the research they're making. That's why MyHeritage was built. So many of the features you've seen here are because we've heard requests from the community, the genetic genealogy community, and the MyHeritage users. Just a quick example is, for instance, MyHeritage notes. So you can add a note on the DNA matches. This was a request from the community. And the most important thing we do is to answer those requests. And lots of the features that we're planning, that we have done, and the features that we're planning in the future are features that will help our users in their DNA research, in their genealogical research, and in how they enjoy our features. So it's something very, very important for us. A few examples of things that are coming up very soon are, for instance, a chromosome browser, which is something that shows you the segment between you and your match. So for instance, in this case, you can see in chromosome number 2, the purple segment is a segment that you and your match share. Now this is very important because you can learn more about different matches because of the segments. So for instance, if you compare to one person and then you compare to another person and you can see the segment is in the same area in the chromosome, there's a very good chance that all the three of you have a common ancestor somewhere up in the tree. Now, in addition to the browser, we're going to have the option for you to download the segments themselves. So the start position, the end position, and the length of the segment. So you can download it and put it in an Excel file or any other file. And this is very important for those of you who really like to dig in and continue the research and show these segments to your friends and family in DNA matches, and to continue the comparisons between you. And this is something that we know the community really wants. Another thing that we've heard from our users that is very important, and we understand it, is what is called a pedigree chart, which basically shows you and your match the direct ancestors that you have, either in common or not in common. And this is something that can be very, very helpful, specifically when we're talking about DNA, because we know that DNA comes only from the direct ancestors. So if we have, marriage or other events in the tree, they're not very relevant for the DNA match, but the direct ancestors is something that is very, very relevant. Last but not least, we can show you, for instance, between the same match, if both of you have events in the same area, okay, or common ancestor places, this is very strengthening for a DNA match. So if it's let's say a match that is a third cousin and you've never heard of this person before, but you see that he has many events, like in Dana's case, in Shiraz, Iran, both of you have many events, that there's a light bulb that you can say, hey, you know, maybe there's something in this match that's worth researching. Because maybe I don't know the person, but there's a very good chance that if we have so many events in a very, very specific place, that this DNA match is an actual match between me and someone that I don't know. So that was just a glimpse of the options that we have in the future, and there's many, many more. This is just the tip of the iceberg, and MyHeritage, as we have in all our technologies, smart matches, record matches, book matches, almost every feature that we do it the best that we can with the highest accuracy, and we're really for our users so they can use it to help them with their research, to help them share and preserve and discover their families.
Every day we find and we hear about more and more amazing success stories about two individuals or two families that met each other thanks to MyHeritage, either DNA tests or the historical records and the family trees. So we are very excited to see where the future takes us and what we will be able to get from it in the future.
So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. We encourage you to go out there and buy a MyHeritage DNA test, and we would love to hear any feedback you have at support@myheritage.com. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.